Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Faces of NextGen Live. It's been a while since we've done this, and as you can see by the length of my beard, it has been quite a while. But I'm Eric Wells, and I am the education coordinator for the NextGen Genealogy Network. And on this show, we get to interview genealogists from all over the world, and we get to know them. And we get to know a really neat person today, and I'm very, very excited to introduce you today to Mr. Sam Williams. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm actually very excited to have this interview with you. A mutual friend of ours, Beth Garrison Wiley, connected the two of us together, and we've just been chatting over the last few months trying to get prepped for this. So I'm really, really excited.
And thanks to Beth.
Yeah, I know. Our mutual friend out in Oklahoma. But you're on the East Coast. It's like 8 o'clock over where you're at.
It is. It is. I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Oh, okay. Is that on the coast, actually, Virginia Beach?
Yeah, it's right on the coast. I'm 10 minutes from the beach. So it's a good place to live.
What's funny is that here in Missouri, we're the center of the U.S., and we have a place called Osage Beach, and it's just a lake. It's not anything like an ocean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I'm blissfully ignorant of the Midwest, so I was like, is there any water, like at a river?
We have a lot of lakes, and they've over the years, engineers have dammed up rivers and created even more lakes. So that's where the beach comes from.
Yeah, nice.
So Sam, how old are you, or better yet, like what's your age range if you don't want to put an exact number?
Sure. I'm 30. I'll be 31 in September.
Well, congratulations! So you've almost been around the sun 30 times or 31 times.
I have. Thanks to my mom and my
dad. And what do you do for a living? What is it? What brings the money in for you?
Yeah, so I'm a pastoral assistant for a Greek Orthodox church here in Virginia Beach. So I went to seminary to be a priest in the Greek Orthodox church, and I'm not ordained yet, but I am in full-time ministry. So I get to teach and preach and work with the youth. So it's pretty a diverse sort of job.
It sounds like it. What does the teaching involve?
So just teaching about scripture, teaching about church history, how to practice the Orthodox Christian faith in kind of a modern age, and there's a lot of doing and practice of our faith. It's kind of different from other Christian groups. So a lot of just kind of teaching the practical is a lot of what I do each day.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, we're here to talk a little bit about genealogy. So let me ask you, how did you get interested in genealogy?
So I think growing up, I always heard a little bit about some of what my history was with my family on both sides, but I didn't really know much of my family. So it was really just asking questions about these people that I had never heard of, or that I didn't even know to ask about. On my mom's side, I always knew that she was somehow related to Patrick Henry. Like, it was one of those stories. I think every family has origin stories of, we're descended from this person or that person. Right. And my family, we knew that somehow we related to Patrick Henry. We didn't know how. And I also knew that my mom was really proud of her German heritage. So her grandfather was all German American, but had been in the States for a while. I knew that. And on my dad's side, I knew nothing. I heard I was part German, but we didn't know anything. And I didn't grow up with my dad's parents. My dad's parents passed when I was 2 weeks old and 2 years old. So that was I think part of my longing to know about who I am had to do with the fact that I didn't even know them. And I didn't grow up with any of my dad's cousins. So I really only knew a little bit of my extended family besides my immediate family. And the older I got, I think there was just this desire to know. And I remember even in high school, I wrote a short little paper about some of my family history. And it was just something that I had learned from a book. There was a book in the Library of Virginia about this one side of my family, and I just thought that was super cool. And I didn't even care about all the different people. I just wanted to know the first person, like the first person that came over to the United States.
That's cool.
I think there was a typo. I think it said that they were from Suffolk or England, but I think it was supposed to be Suffolk. But I remember writing that in my paper, and the English history or the English teacher said, "I think you spelled that wrong." So there was always this interest, but I didn't really know much. And it wasn't until after I got out of school, got out of grad school, and I actually had a little bit of time on my hands where I could read books, I could do things that weren't immediate needs in front of me. And that's when I started to dive in a little bit.
So it was mostly in your 20s when you started really doing the research, but you kind of had the bug. You were exposed to it a little bit through family stories, and then that's kind of cool that in high school there was a book that talked a little bit about one side of your family. And you found it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And this is a library in Virginia Beach area, or?
No, so I grew up actually in Central Virginia, so right outside of Richmond. So at the Library of Virginia is where this book is.
Got it. That's cool.
Yeah. Those the majors. I think it's the majors and their families. I think it's the Major family, the Waddell family, and then on another line it's Cabell and a few other names that were kind of big names in Charles City County.
And these were all kind of had biographies of their own in this book that you read?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, which I still haven't gone back and read because I'm a little skeptical now of written biographies about people and genealogies. I'm always like, what's their sources? I want to go back and look over those things. So
I think I would tend to agree with you, but I think that also they can kind of give you a good starting point, or maybe some clues of where else to look to kind of back that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good amount of background information at least has been provided for me. So that's been a good thing. But it's ironically not even those sides of my family that I'm most interested in. So it's kind of an irony, I think.
Well, what are you most interested in? Oh, your father's side?
Yeah, so on my mom's side, there's random families that occasionally will interest me, and the German side really is intriguing, especially because they all came before the Civil War. So they were all immigrants before or around the Civil War. And so that side does interest me because they were just hard workers that all had businesses in Richmond. But really the side that most interests me is on my dad's side. So it's my paternal line, the Williams family, and then there's another side, my dad's grandmother. Her side really interests me as well.
Well, tell me more about that. What interests you about that?
So on the Williams side, it's really just it's a brick wall, and everybody loves the mystery. Everybody loves what happened next. Where do they come from? I don't know. On every line of my family, I've gone relatively far. And on my paternal line, it stops at Joseph Williams, born in 1817. And that kills me because I wonder who's his parents. Like, was he really born in the county that he lived in the rest of his life? I'm right now working on trying to figure out exactly when he passed. And so around that person, and then there's another side, the Stratton family on my dad's grandmother's side. The Strattons, they have a lot of descendants, and so with DNA, it's been really cool. Like, I can immediately tell if there's a Stratton descendant that's DNA tested because it's almost like we joke about it. It's like the Stratton DNA sticks to us like glue or something. So I can tell. Like, I'll see a match, and I'm like, hey, just letting you know, you're from the Strattons around Chesterfield or Powhatan, Virginia, and they'll get back to me. I've had several people. They'll get back to me. They'll say, I don't have any family in Virginia. I'm like, I'm in Virginia, and I'm telling you, if I'm your family, you have family from Virginia because I've never left. So you're welcome. And then it's just a matter of trying to figure it out, and that's been a lot of fun.
So Joseph Williams, going back to him, it sounds like it's a very common name, and I would imagine it's just difficult when you get all these records of Joseph Williams, kind of sifting through which one relates to you specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And he married Anne Adams, the daughter of William and Mary.
Now, have you taken a Y-DNA test? Because it sounds like he's a direct paternal ancestor of yours.
Yeah, so I did Y-DNA testing, and the beauty of that is that there was only one. The closest match is my dad's second cousin.
Sure.
So shout out to Bruce Williams.
What's up, Bruce?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. He's in there, and then there's all these other people with last name Blackwell and Traylor.
Okay.
So it's one of two things, right? It's either a non-paternal event at some point, or it's a connection before the adoption of surnames in Wales. We're assuming. I've also been doing some other additional SNP testing with Y-DNA through family tree DNA. And so recently kind of narrowing down my haplogroup some has been kind of interesting. Hoping that will maybe bear some fruit, but it kind of feels like stabbing into the dark a little bit until some more folks take some Y-DNA testing. So please take some Y-DNA testing. If you're from Chesterfield or Powhatan, Virginia, just do your Y-DNA test. Find out. Part of it too has been like reaching out to distant relatives and being like, hey, you want to take a Y-DNA test or an autosomal DNA test? I swear it's not creepy.
Yeah.
And a lot of my dad's cousins, they've been doing it, so I'm grateful for that. But until then, I'm continuing to write about Joseph, and hopefully someone will find my blog and they'll be like, hey, I know that person, or I have a connection somehow, and maybe that'll be the thing I'm looking for. We'll see.
Now, you've done all this research, and I'm sure that there are some people that just kind of stick out to you that you could either feel a connection to, or you would just really want to get to know. So, who would be one of the ancestors that you really most likely would want to meet?
It's a great question. One obvious is Joseph.
Yeah.
Like, come on, Joseph, tell me about you. Where were you born? Who are your parents? Who are your grandparents? Just tell me. That's sometimes I'm getting closer to knowing who he was. Just looking at Chancy records and things like that. Yeah. But if I can meet him, that would be great. Another one would be David Stratton, or his dad, John Stratton. John, I might prefer. And
what time period is John? You talking about with John?
So John Stratton, he died about 1805.
Okay.
He's reputedly a soldier in the American Revolution, and he is a validated person who served according to the Sons and the Daughters of the American Revolution. But I haven't seen really super solid evidence that it's my John Stratton. They say that he's John Handley Stratton, but I haven't seen no evidence of his middle name, like how they got that. Sure. I know that I'm descended from a John Stratton, and I know who all of his children were, and DNA evidence has really connected all of us. But I'd love, if I could ask him, what regiment did you serve in? Is this really you? Is your middle name Handley?
That's cool.
A lot of those things I'd like to know, because right now it's just, I'm struggling to, those are my mysteries right now. The Stratton family just super interests me. There's a lot of, his descendants are white and they're black. And, so I've been trying to connect a lot of our African-American cousins, and just tell them about their history and their heritage too.
Yeah.
Because that's been a really fascinating journey on that side for sure.
Awesome. And with all of the research that you've been doing, what has been one of the most surprising discoveries or the most interesting discoveries that you've had?
Probably so John's son, David, my closer ancestor.
John Sutton, is that right?
John Stratton.
Stratton.
Yeah, so David Stratton, I think the biggest surprise was when I realized that he had a daughter with an enslaved woman. And when and I don't have proof in the sense of like, absolutely he was the father of Kate Stratton,
Hmm.
but um, DNA evidence connects people, and I know that Kate Stratton was owned by David Stratton, and a lot of Kate's descendants, which hopefully some of y'all are listening. Hopefully Trisha is out there. Shout out to my cousin Trish. Um, we figured it out, and that was pretty surprising. And because we made that connection of Kate Stratton being the daughter of David, that's just opened the door to all these African American DNA matches.
Oh, wow.
And and I mean, down to there's this one African American church in Powhatan, Virginia, near Macon, which is a town in Powhatan. And this one church, like everybody buried at that church are my cousins.
Oh,
And
wow.
I just really want to meet the elders of that community and
Hmm.
ask who they remember. And um, slowly but surely, I'm getting connected to a lot of the descendants from that relationship. And for better for worse, you know, the relationship happened, and now I have all these cousins because of it. So I'm grateful for that for sure.
How far away is the church from where you're at?
About 2 hours. So
Okay.
I grew up in Powhatan. So it's
Oh.
small. It's a county with only one high school.
Hmm.
And that high school, my stepdad went to, my aunt went to, my grandfather went to the original high school. On my dad's side, I'm very deeply rooted in Powhatan. So I go back whenever I go to see my mom. I'm in Powhatan, and on Friday I was actually there
Oh,
doing
okay.
some research at the courthouse, and uh, so it's close enough, thank God, where I can go regularly.
It sounds like it would be kind of nice to just kind of stroll through that graveyard,
Yeah.
uh, kind of just take a look at all the names and know that you're pretty closely related to most of them in there.
Yeah, and there's another cemetery right down the street, and some other relatives are buried there too. And actually, recently I went to visit them, and a man said, "Oh, there's a guy who takes care of the cemetery. Let me call him." And he came, and he was talking. We were talking, and I was like, "Wait, what's? Do you have a connection to the cemetery?" And he said, "Yeah, he named the person, and we were cousins. We were like fourth cousins."
Huh.
So right there, immediately, I'm making a connection to her family. So it was cool.
That's great.
Yeah, that's Powhatan for you. So we're all cousins somehow.
Sounds like it's kind of friendly too.
Yeah, I think so. I like to think so.
Cool. So we were talking a little bit before, and this is kind of cool because you've got a little bit of show and tell. So, what are some of your favorite books, genealogy related or otherwise?
Yeah. All
Because
right. So
you've got a stack of them for
I
us.
do. I do. I love books. I have bookshelves galore. I have a pile of books that don't have a bookshelf yet. So I figured, you know, I'd show you first some genealogy books, some ones that were recommended to me and that I've started to read. I have to say started to because I start lots of books at the same time, and that causes some trouble in finishing said books. Rebecca Whitman Colfert, she really helped me a lot in saying you need to read these two books. If you're gonna do genealogy professionally, you have to read these two books. Like, no questions asked. Like, thou shalt. So I said, okay, I'm listening to you. If you are watching, Rebecca, thank you. So the first one is an obvious one, The Researcher's Guide to American Genealogy. This one, I I actually got to meet Val Greenwood at RootsTech this year, and I don't think I realized how awesome that was. Like I was like, "Oh, you wrote that book? Awesome!" And I didn't
You
even
didn't
buy the root.
fanboy out on Val Greenwood?
I'm sorry.
You didn't fanboy out on Val Greenwood?
I'm fanboying now. You know, I didn't know I should fanboy at the
The
time. So
shock is just hitting you. Just like, oh.
yeah, it was like, oh, you wrote that book. Cool. I've heard of that on like Extreme Teens. Like, I should probably read that. And then I met him. I didn't buy the book. Then Rebecca tells me, you need to buy the book. And I was like, I
Oh.
could have gotten it autographed, everything. So, alas, I'm reading it now and it's amazing. And thank you, Val. You're great. Um, now I'm also, because of Rebecca, reading Evidence Explained, which also I've heard people talk about it, and I'm also reading that as well. But these are two books that it's kind of like you read a period, you read a bit of it, and then you chew on it, and then you walk away, and you come back and you read a little bit more. And
yeah, I kind of have to use that book like in chunks when there's a particular situation that I need to reference, then it's always up there, and then I stick like a label on the page, like okay, and then write on it, okay, this is how you cite land records or source whatever, and so I always can go back to the same place because I love going through courthouse and I love going through land records and courthouses and land records and things like that, and so
they're the funnest.
there's several tabs in there that are helpful.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Like it's a huge reference. They're both big reference books. So I'm working through the beginning of the books where they're just kind of explaining some more of the process of different things. And so when I get to that, then I'm definitely going to do what you just said and hold different pages. The next one that I read through, it's a really super easy read, is Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy by Blaine Bettinger. So thank you, Blaine. This book's honestly, it's a recommended for anyone doing genetic genealogy, anyone working with DNA of any type. It really explains a lot more of I would say the basics, but he also does get into some nitty gritty as well. It was one of those books that, because I've been doing so much with DNA for the last 5 years or so, full 4 years. And when I say I'm doing it a lot, like every day, I'm digging into it.
Yeah.
So when I was reading his book, it was refreshing because I was like, all right, I'm doing it right. I get this, right? So it was very validating. But it's also a great reference if someone's confused about a certain type of DNA testing, or even some of the ethics of DNA testing. I mean, I think that's helpful as well. So
because it sounds like from what you're telling us is that you have to, that you've really been diving into the DNA research and connecting it to all of your online and in-person research too. So you're using DNA as best as you can, and quite a bit from what I hear.
Yeah, and it's the important thing too is to remember that DNA and DNA results are just another type of record source.
Right.
And the good thing about DNA record is that it's almost a gift that keeps giving, right? Because as long as there's people taking DNA tests, like my source is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's I just put my stuff out there, and it's almost like fishing, right? Like you put your DNA out there, and then you're just waiting for some more fish. And so each person that takes a DNA test, each person that matches, is helping me get a little closer to breaking down those brick walls. So that would be my next purely genealogy book. After that, it's going to be a little bit more stuff that's helped teach me a little bit. So this book I haven't finished. I'm getting close, getting very close. It's called Slave Religion, The Invisible Institution and the Antebellum South by Albert, I'm going to mess up his last name, Rabateau, I think. This is a really great recommended book. Anyone who's interested in African-American genealogy, to understand the intersection between religion and the institution of slavery, and especially in the South, if you have Southern ancestors, it's great. So it's not about genealogy, it's about religion, but especially in the African-American community, religion is integral to community. So it's a really great book.
How far through it are you?
I am on page 243. Uh, oh, I'm pretty close. Um, I have about less than 100 pages left.
Nice.
But it's underlined, it's
Yeah.
highlighted. There's so much interesting stuff in it. Like it's not boring. It's great. Um, and the author lives in Princeton, New Jersey. So I have friends that are friends with him. So I'm like,
Okay.
I want to come meet him. He's
So
great.
you're gonna get the book signed this time, right?
I'll get it signed this time if it's the last thing I do. Like he's a any guy who can write a book on this topic, like he's cool in my book. So I wanna know him. The next two books are really just recommended for me, and I want to read them. So I'm just gonna say them real quick. The Cooking Gene by Michael Twitty. Um, we've tweeted back and forth a little bit. I like him a lot. He's a cool guy. He's a genealogist and a chef. Um, and he also he's just really studying the intersection between African American culture and cuisine, and the origin of African American cuisine. And I love food. And he's also genealogist, and he's lives in Virginia, which is also a cool thing.
Yeah.
And
So
I
you can actually drive up to his place and get it signed too.
it's another thing I have to do, right? Like go meet Michael. Come on. So shout out to Michael. Everybody go buy his book. He needs your support. And as a Virginian, my identity of being Southern is really more being Virginian. And my identity as a Virginian, at the end of the day, is wrapped up in my love for family. Saying y'all, like I can't let go of y'all. I never will let go of y'all. I lived up north for 7 years, and I would say y'all with a New Jersey accent, but I'd still say y'all. And it's in my food, right?
Okay.
It's in the type of food my mom made, the type of food my great grandmother made, that was passed down. And so Southern food is so much part of my identity. So I'm excited to read that book. And there's another book that was recommended on a podcast called Albion Seed. And it's a big book. So I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's called Four British Folkways in America. So it's supposed to be about kind of the immigration of people from different parts of the UK and how that affected American culture. And I really like that sort of stuff because that's the meat and potatoes behind our genealogy, right? Like, where do these people come from? What did they like to do? Where did they get those traditions? And how did it impact culture today and the places that we're doing research, the place that we're looking at records? So that's what I'm trying to fill myself with.
I'm going to go back to Blaine's book a little bit and talk a little bit about the genetic genealogy again. Because we've got a question in the chat room from Teresina Lloyd, and she's asking, what's your take on how people are dropping the the CMs and the SNPs to get the match in like GEDmatch or something like that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, sometimes I feel like it can be legit. Sometimes, like if someone is like, because I think normally it's at 7 centimorgans, I think, on GEDmatch.
Yeah, that's the standard.
So if in case people aren't as familiar with GEDmatch, you're comparing two different DNA tests to each other. And what GEDmatch considers as the minimum amount of DNA that they have to share is about 7 centimorgans. So a certain length of DNA on a certain chromosome. And so some people in an attempt to find a connection between two different people will drop that threshold down to like 3 or 4.
Right.
To see maybe do we share a really small amount, but not 7. And sometimes that of like false positives, right? Like you're human or you're both from Virginia, so you have this really minuscule amount of DNA in common. Doesn't mean that you can actually find that in any sense of genealogical history, like in research. But sometimes, I found there's certain people that do match me, that match a lot of other people from a certain family. And when I drop the threshold down to 3 or 4, that it shows up at that point. So I think there can be legitimate use for dropping it down small, but you also have to be aware that you might be getting a false positive at that point.
Right. I think that what can also be helpful is to have, like you're talking about geography and stuff like that, when it comes to matching some DNA during back some generations. It may be helpful to have your DNA chromosomes kind of painted to kind of show what you inherited from whom, and that would, in a sense, give you a good starting point to connect the family trees, instead of just relying on this really low threshold that GEDmatch pops up.
Especially in situations with endogamy of communities that have been living with each other and intertwining and intermarrying over and over and over again. I have ancestors on my paternal grandmother's side from Halifax County, Virginia. And all of my family from Halifax, Virginia, I swear they match everyone in Halifax. So I look at a DNA match and I'm like, well, they're from Halifax, like not a question, right? And if I were to drop down to a low threshold for somebody, who knows how we could be connected, because there's any number of different connections that they could be related to me through.
Right.
So it's really just depending on the situation, I think.
Cool. So when you're doing this research, when you're looking through your DNA and looking through your records and stuff, where do you feel like you get the best results, or where do you just enjoy doing this kind of work? Like sitting down and just crunching, where do you love doing it?
Yeah, so because of the 21st century and the joys of the internet, I like to just sit in a coffee shop, have my headphones in, listening to my Sia Pandora station, and going crazy at AncestryDNA. I mean, if I were to just spend an entire day doing genealogy, I'd probably be working on new matches on AncestryDNA and plugging away at trying to determine their trees and how they connect to me. That to me just sounds like fun. That's what I call a fun day.
I know. I think you're in good company too, because we can kind of relate.
Yeah, like it's just like, why? What else would I be doing for 8 hours straight? You know, and missing my life.
Everyone else is weird for not enjoying that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like you just haven't tasted and known that it's the best thing that you could be doing. So that's one thing. Another place as far as doing on the ground research is the circuit court at Powhatan County Courthouse in Virginia. Since so much of my family is there, like so much original records are there, and it's just great to get my hands on these records and knowing that I'm one of few people that have ever touched it. There's also so much records there that haven't been found really, and I'm trying to reach out to the clerk there to see if I can get some contact with those records. To be continued on that issue, but also Library of Virginia. It's like I feel like a kid in a candy shop at the Library of Virginia. Like there's so much there. There's so many records just in the manuscripts room. I go to the manuscripts room and I'm just like, I'm so excited. What am I going to look at today? And then I'm sitting there for hours looking at the same couple of pages, and then you know, hoping to put in some more requests for records before the lunch break happens. So that's also, if I'm looking at original records, Library of Virginia is the place to go for sure.
Now, when you're doing, is there like a specific area of research that you like to focus on?
Yeah, so as far as areas, if I'm looking at a region that I'm passionate about, it would be my county, Powhatan. I feel like there's not a lot of people studying Powhatan, Virginia. I mean,
is there a historical society in that county? There
is. It's a small historical society. I would love to start a genealogy society for Powhatan. So you know, some of my cousins out there, Dawn, definitely let's do this. I'm sure we could start it, you know. So with Powhatan, Virginia, that's a huge interest for me. As far as types of genealogy, types of research, African American research is really interesting to me. I just feel it's very life-giving doing
Yeah.
African American research.
Yeah.
Because you know, if I'm doing my own research and I'm taking it back to the 1700s, no problem, like super easy, right? And then I connect with an African American cousin, and because of our connection with DNA, we're able to figure out something about their family
Right.
past 1870, and it just feels like I can give a gift where my ancestors had taken that gift. So I can in a way give back in a way that my ancestors had taken. So that's a blessing on my end. I just think it's interesting. You meet the best people. Black Pro Gen folks are great. I love y'all. And I had the most fun at Roots Tech this year in one of the talks. So so that's been really great. And then also Greek genealogy is also a big interest for me since I serve in the Greek American community and an Orthodox church. I've had so much fun doing Greek American genealogy and studying the adaptation of surnames in the Greek community and how the naming process goes generation after generation. That's been really fun as well.
So do you have any Greek ancestry in your lines at all?
According to AncestryDNA, maybe 5%, but I think that's just because I'm from Europe.
So this is just something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, you know, my adopted family, so to speak, is Greek American, and they've been really good to me, and I've been able to give back to them a little bit by studying and showing them more about where they come from.
Awesome. Do you take genealogy clients on? Are you for hire?
Am I for hire? Rebecca gave me some assignments of do this studying, work on this, hone your skills, know what you know and know what you don't know. And once you do that, then work on that, then think about that. So right now I'm really just trying to discover what I don't know, right? Like I'm trying to keep doing what I'm doing, keep doing the on-ground research and just discover more and hone my skills, my research skills. And what I'm also doing right now is working on my genealogy blog. That way I can get used to writing about genealogy rather than just talking about it, rather than just doing it on my own, actually explaining how I've come to the certain conclusions that I've come to. And that's already been beneficial for me, writing about genealogy. It's helping kind of clarify some of my research and how I've done it. So at that point, then I'd be interested in taking clients. That's something I would love to do this professionally. Right now, I've just been helping people for free. I helped a cousin of mine discover who her parents were. I helped another cousin of mine, along with Dawn and a lot of our other cousins, figure out who her father was. So I have that experience, but it's just trying to understand better what I know and understand the different record sets before I take on clients.
And you blog at orthodoxgenealogist.blogspot.com, right?
That's right.
And we've got that in the description of YouTube here. So
go to my blog, everybody.
What's that?
I said, go to my blog, everybody, please. And it has a strange name. You know, the blog, the URL is simple, orthodoxgenealogist.blogspot.com, but the name is ancestral anamnesis. So I use a Greek word to kind of explain my approach to genealogy. So
cool.
So
True Lewis is actually watching, and she's saying she's going to add that blog to her dashboard.
Thank you.
Dawn is asking me to ask you about the discovery of birth family for adoptees through DNA and genealogy research.
Yes, you're awesome, Dawn. You're the lady.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, so we had this awesome experience. This was actually probably the most beneficial experience in getting me hooked on genetic genealogy and making me passionate about reaching out to my DNA cousins. So I had done my autosomal DNA testing through AncestryDNA in 2014. And in 2015, I believe, I can't remember exactly when it happened. I think either 14 or 15. My first cousin, Veronica, reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you look into this match that you have?" And I said, "Sure." She's like, "Do you know how we're related?" And we were kind of poking away a little bit. We started to realize that it was on my great grandmother's side, but we didn't know exactly how. And so that's when I joined GEDmatch and was comparing centimorgans and looking at all that stuff. And it was super confusing at first, right? And
Yes, yes, it's really overwhelming.
but we're working on our tree and we're saying, who could she be related to? How could we be connected? And eventually one day I was like, well, it's definitely through one of my great grandmother's siblings. And it's just a matter of who. So I started working down from my great grandparents. And Dawn eventually was like, well, I see this name Simpson coming up. Maybe that could be the connection. And she happened to have known somebody in her neighborhood with the last name Simpson. And
Really?
so then she asked, like, hey, does this guy know anybody with this name of this our cousin's mom? And he was like, yeah, I knew her in Richmond. And they were like, did you know her? And he's like, yeah.
That you want to
So,
tell me?
so he did his DNA test, and he was her father. So that
Wow.
was the most exciting thing. And we all
Wow.
had a family reunion, and we got to know each other. And at this family reunion, they pull out this box full of photos, and they show me this photo. Like, do you know who's in this picture? I said, of course I know who's in that picture. I know who all these people are in that picture. And it's in that moment, right, where like we know we're blood, right? We share DNA, it's on paper. And then when someone pulls out a picture of your family, that's when you're like, all right, we're definitely family. You have a picture of my great grandmother, like we're relatives,
That's awesome.
That was a great experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you first started getting into genealogy, if you could travel back and talk to that person, what would you tell that person? What would you tell yourself when you first started getting into it?
Yeah. Wow. So when I was in high school, that first interest, right? I would have told high school me, talk to everyone.
Uh,
Um, because when high school, so much of my family was still living, right? I mean,
yeah,
I had my dad's aunts and uncles. I had all these elders in my family that I could have talked to, that I could have recorded, that I could have asked them tough questions. I could have gotten to know them. I didn't know to do that. And then same thing, 2010, when I first started a tree on Ancestry,
hmm
I also didn't know, talk to the oldest people, talk to them first. Like I just went straight to the records.
right.
Um, and I
You know,
definitely regret that.
and in some sense, that's the easiest thing to do is to do the records. Sometimes, like talking and approaching people is a little nerve wracking, especially if especially some of the elders and stuff. If you don't exactly know what you're going to ask them,
Yeah,
so
especially because I didn't even know them.
right,
I had never met my dad's aunts and uncles. As crazy as that is,
Hmm.
and so now I'm getting to know their children and their great grandchildren, and we're creating relationships, and I'm getting to know more about my grandparents through their stories. So I definitely would say to past me, go talk to the elders first, do the research later,
Got it.
collect the stories first, do the research later. Because that's what I tell people now is I say first, do the interviews, ask questions that you wouldn't even think to ask. Just like, hey, tell me about growing up. What was your
Right.
favorite thing, growing up? What was your favorite food that your mom would make? It's those questions that then get our elders to start answering the questions we didn't know to ask. Um,
And in some sense, like that book you read in high school that had your family in it, some of those stories may actually direct you to different collection records that would verify or dispute kind of those stories, but just give you more uh, places to look than just online research that you wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, an example, even recently, on Friday, I was looking at marriage records, and I saw, I'm going to write about this in my blog soon. I saw a theme, like it was the same pastor marrying all these different people. Um, and I said, wow, like I need to know where that pastor preached, right? Where was the church
Right.
that he was at? And I realized his father was also a pastor. I did some research, and that's connecting me to another part of the neighboring county where I can start looking at some connections.
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, those clues that are in stories that people tell you, the clues that are in those written stories that you can find in the library, but also clues on records where you wouldn't think, look at the pastor. You're just looking at the parents' names,
Right.
right? You're looking at the date.
Sometimes the witnesses, but rarely
Right.
the pastor.
But even the witnesses sometimes just like bewilder me even more. It's like,
Right.
all right, another Williams was the witness. Is he a cousin? Is he an uncle? Is he the dad? I don't know. But it's definitely a clue that's worth diving into.
So we talked a little bit about Roots Tech and how much fun you had at it this year. Do you have plans to be at another convention sometime soon? And where would that be?
So I really, 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 really hope to be at Roots Tech 2019. It was, again, like a candy shop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's a show in a lot of ways, right? There's literally music and dancing that you can watch. But it's also just like, walking past Kenyatta Berry and CC Moore, like, it's no big deal. Like, I know who those people are from TV and they're right in front of me.
And Val Greenwood.
Yeah, and Val Greenwood just bumping into him and saying hi, and so those are things that I would love to do again. But also all these friends that I met, people that share a passion and that are, in an age range, right? I mean, I saw high schoolers there,
Yeah.
but I also saw elders there, and met a lot of the next gen folks there, and had a fun hangout. So I definitely want to go to Roots Tech next year as long as finances can allow. But I also really want to go to. I don't have a particular plans for institutes and conventions, but I would like to find the right institute and the right conventions to go to that can help me hone my skills more, and so that I can give back to others in a better, more direct way. But there's also an upcoming conference in Norfolk, Virginia, which is really close to me. So the last 2 years I wasn't able to make that conference just because of schedule conflict. So I'm really hoping this year maybe it'll work since it's in my backyard, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, if you happen to be attending one of those conversations or conventions and see Sam, walk on up to him and say, "Hey, I saw you on this cool video on YouTube."
Yeah. I don't bite, y'all. Like, we can chat. Let's get coffee. So
Now, people can find you on the web at your blog, Orthodox Genealogist at blogspot.com. But where else can they find you on the web?
So you can find me on Facebook. I'm in a few different Facebook groups for genealogy. I'm on Twitter. My name is a little odd on Twitter. It's again a Greek word. It's Soson Kyrie, which means "save Lord." It's the first two words of a popular hymn in the Orthodox Church. And so I'm on Twitter. I love following kind of a diversity of different subjects. But my main one that I probably tweet about the most these days is genealogy. So you can find me on Twitter, Soson Kyrie, on Facebook, on my blog. That's probably the best way to kind of follow what I'm doing.
Sure.
And I just posted a blog today about my Father's Day weekend in Richmond, and some of the research I was doing, and also people I was getting to meet. And it's where the rubber hits the road of research and actually meeting and being with family. So
very cool. Sam, thank you so much for sitting down and taking the time for us to get to know you. I really, really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Well, guys, you can see all of Sam's info in the description for this video. Find him on his blog and find him on the interwebs. And everyone, I really appreciate you sitting down with us too and getting to know Sam as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to have another one of these in a couple of weeks. And stay tuned on Twitter, here on YouTube, and also on Facebook for the announcement of that next interview. But before you go, be sure to click that subscribe button and click that little bell next to it so you can get some notifications of when the next the next video is coming up. So until next time, guys, I'm Eric Wells, the education coordinator for the NextGen Genealogy Network, and I had such a great time. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you later. Take care.